Okay, thanks everyone for joining. The purpose of today's call is to talk through our phase 1 implementation closeout with the customer success group. I wanted to start off though with introducing a few people from the Ironclad side that you may not have had the opportunity to meet yet, but these team members will be some of your main point of contacts moving forward. So want to take some time to introduce you and have everyone on the CSG side give just a brief introduction of who you are as well. So we can start on our side. Colby, would you mind kicking us off?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name's Colby. I'm a senior customer success manager on the enterprise team at Ironclad. I've been here about 5 years, based out of San Francisco. I'll be your main point of contact going forward. So everything post-implementation, I'm pretty much your starting point. We'll talk a lot more about what that looks like in the back half of this.
Based on that.
Mute button is a
Based in now.
the contract.
Oh, so materials. All right, what we would like to cover today is take a look back at this scope that we originally had in our implementation SOW and look back at what we've completed. We'll also resurface the goals that we talked through in our kickoff and how we've done in accomplishing those goals. We'll talk about the launch status of your workflows and templates. We'll also spend a good amount of time on the closing memo, which is our deliverable that outlines your workflows and the design of those and gives some ongoing maintenance recommendations. And then we'll talk about what comes next. So Colby and Vincent will be going through the customer success engagement model and our support model moving forward. So looking back, what you originally purchased in this implementation project was 4 workflows and 19 templates, 2 live admin trainings, and that business user training, which was the customer materials development that we did with Gigi and the team around user enablement. Also a couple of integrations. Naturally, the Salesforce integration was super critical to these workflows, as well as your Okta integration. And then you all have purchased the enterprise success plan, which Colby will go through in more detail today. In terms of what we accomplished, we ended up launching 3 major workflows. If you remember, originally you had the implementation services SOW as well as expert services SOW, and we combined those into one workflow. So we had the opportunity to streamline there, which will make for easier maintenance, having less workflows and templates to maintain moving forward. Those ended up getting combined into the professional services SOW workflow. That's really the core workflow for your team and the one that we spent a lot of time on making sure to get the design right and the templates implemented into that workflow. The one kind of stemming off of that is the change order workflow, which has 4 templates, 3 non-English templates in addition. And then the professional services SWE workflow, we ended up implementing 1 English template for that one. In addition to condensing the one workflow, we also were able to reduce the number of the templates needed to support these workflows moving forward. So just in what we launched above, originally you all had 13 different templates and we condensed those into 9. So that should make your template management moving forward much easier. We also, as you were all too familiar, worked a lot on the scope language library and getting that incorporated into SOW and change order. Prior to Ironclad, this document lived kind of outside of your statements of work and was a document your team would go reference and pull in services scope sections as they had them in scope for their agreements. So I know it's really important to the team to continue to work on building that out into the workflows, which we've put some helpful documentation in the closing memo around to make that process of adding additional SLLs easy for you. We also had the 2 integrations. Specifically, these workflows are married really tightly to Salesforce because of the SPW components that populate into your docs. I went back and did a quick look just because I was curious how many fields we ended up actually mapping for each of these workflows. But for SOW and change order, there are 37 mapped fields back to Salesforce. So what this means is there's a lot less manual steps that your sellers have to take in order to get their opportunity in sync with their contracts that they're executing, which is huge. Also in the SWE workflow, there are 22 mapped fields. So a few less, but still we are able to leverage some automation there in that workflow as well. So I went and pulled our goals that we had in our kickoff meeting. And if you remember, coming into that call, we were all excited about the future possibility of what these workflows will look like in Ironclad. I mean, you were moving from a manual process with your templates in a Google Drive, and often we're challenged with version control or sellers using the wrong templates. And that was causing a lot of rework, possibly burning some review cycles and extending that time to get to signature with your customers. You also had a goal of getting your contracts in sync with Salesforce by integrating to that SPW object that you all have been working on for your pricing. As far as compliance and standardization, what really surfaced in this area were things like keeping all of your contracts in one system. What we heard is that a lot of people have their own templates in their personal Google Drive folders, or they have executed agreements that you don't know about because they're in their personal Drive folders. So having all of those records in Ironclad in one system was really important. Also, that would help you minimize exposure in the deals out there, knowing what's in effect, what obligations you've committed to, and things like that. We also were able to reduce the amount of manual effort for SOX controls. I believe previously the SOX controls were pretty limited within your SOW workflows, and now that team has had a chance to review and start to put in place more of these controls from a SOX perspective. An area that I highlighted in blue was the capture custom language and see through to delivery. If you all remember, we took record sync out of scope for the initial implementation. And so that's that kind of final process in the workflow where we would push terms back into Salesforce from Ironclad. So as you all are working on contract obligations as a roadmap item with the LPX team or internally, that would be an area to set up in order to capture some of that custom language in obligations. So taking a look back at this, like what all really resonates for you all? Where do you feel like we've made improvements and you're excited about kind of where we're at with the implementation? Yeah, Jim.
Yeah, I'll start, but really it's everywhere. Like we're making some big jumps in all of these areas, fortunately. So they all still resonate, and they all still hold true. But I think we're starting to see, now that we're just over our first 45 days and have gone through our first in the quarter, I think it's really proving out a lot. The capturing the custom language, I'm still like to understand a little bit more about how we track that and how we audit. And also like around like SLLs and like just reporting in general is more kind of top of mind. I know like guys like you and I chatted a little bit earlier, especially now that we're trying to, explain to all of our leadership just all the benefits that we just saw, especially as we start requiring like cutovers to the English language and requiring cutovers to Ironclad. We want to help like be able to reinforce that business value proposition to all of the end users. So the reporting has been top of mind at the moment. That's where like I'd love to like dive in and I think and start exploring more. But like even that, like it's still really beneficial at the moment. I think all of these are we've hit everything, and it's much better than what the prior version was doing it manually. So yeah, great work, everybody.
Yeah, Colby. I was mentioning earlier on our call with Jim and team that you'd be a great resource to help guide them through some of their reporting needs.
Looking forward to it.
Anyone else, like any feedback you've been hearing that the team's excited about or that you feel like we've accomplished with implementation?
Yeah, I think that just the reduction of the manual errors and the amount of compliance check, people having to review like Org 62 in a manual document, it is very transparent. So that is definitely a win. People like to see all the versions and the version control, as well as the approval flow. I think it is just a different way of working, and I think it's going to be of a greater impact because it's all right there, and our field just doesn't get it yet. Right. So I think that might be just change management. But I think at the end of the day, they will truly love it because we are providing some transparency in the approval flow.
That's great.
Yeah, I'd second that too, Holly. The version control for like the legal users, the version control feature is huge in terms of like not having to download the version, compare it off the template to see what was net new changes. So it definitely speeds approvals. And then I think the field will start to realize that while it feels like a lot of additional approvals, it's actually not. It's just all in one place as opposed to this disjointed experience. So when you see it all in one place, it feels like it's a lot, but it is much better. So I think change management and then just more experience in the tool we'll really start to see that value across the business.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ryan. Chloe, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I know, Jim, you said that this list still resonates as your core goals. Is there anything else that you or anybody on the call would change or add to this list? Goal setting is going to be a big part of what we do post implementation when we transition to ongoing success. And it's always interesting to revisit this list now that you're live and kind of set a new North Star. If relevant.
No, that's totally relevant. You're absolutely right. Because, it's one thing that the initial launch is one thing, and especially coming from a totally manual process. We were coming off of one CLM, migrating onto another. It's completely manual onto this. So, you're exactly right that we have to create a kind of a new North Star and guiding principles and where we're going to. So I think that's something we probably should chat maybe in depth about coming up on what that really looks like. I've got a list together of next scope items and things that we want to start to tackle, whether internally or we have somebody else help us with it. And it's there's a big list that we probably can use for that, but it's really at top of mind for me now is getting it to steady state, which involves bringing out some other templates and getting these other languages live, and then some enhancements that we've got post-launch. But it's really the steady state, I guess, in short, is my North Star. But it's like trying to really figure out what that looks like, and then long-term optimization as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. As far as launch status, just taking a look back at what we all activated on. If we remember all the way back to our pilot English SOW, this was in December. We did a mid-December launch and activated about 15 sellers and about double the amount of improvers at that launch. From there through February, we were gathering feedback from those pilot users and incorporating those enhancements or changes into the workflow. We relaunched in February an expansion for the pilot team to also include English change order and English suite. Continued to gather feedback from those teams as we were building the non-English templates into the workflow. In March, we did the GA release. So this was sort of our big bang launch with all of your users. It's about 10,000 sellers that we activated with that launch in March. Again, on just the English templates for these 3 agreement types. In April, we had a minor release where we did some template improvements and workflow updates. We also, for this launch, prepared all of the non-English versions for SOW and change order. And if you remember, you all went through UAT of those as part of this release process, but we kept those behind a feature flag as part of the 1.4 launch, so that your team could prepare for a launch for those at a later date. So what I have is pending down here is those non-English versions of SOW and change order. So those are ready for your team to launch when you decide to pull the trigger there. And obviously you could still make additional template updates prior to those launches if you needed to. And we've included in the closing memo instructions for how to essentially remove that feature flag to reveal those additional non-English templates in the workflows when you're ready to do that release. Along the top, we have some initial engagement metrics that Colby pulled together. So as far as this is comparing March to April. So monthly active users, we had 717 in April. This was an 87% increase over March. So we're seeing a lot of additional engagement in the platform and more users engaging with those workflows. Again, we have the 3 active configurations live in your production instance. And then in terms of number of workflows launched, so number of agreements launched, there are 298 that were launched in April, and that's, in March, and that's a 240% increase. At this time, I'm going to transition it to Ed, who's going to walk through the closing memo with you all. Ed, do you want me to bring that up on my screen, or do you want to drive?
I'll drive if that's okay. Thanks. Hi, everybody. I know I spoke to a lot of you not that long ago, but always good to see everybody again. I'm going to give you an overview of this document because it's long. It's 61 pages. We were not going to go through all the detail on it. But the purpose of this memo is to kind of give you a snapshot of what we did, right? So it's all the things Allison just talked about, but more granular, more here's what we did within this workflow. Here's the particular logic that drives this part of the workflow. It's kind of a snapshot, a moment in time of what we did, how we got there. We didn't document, of course, every design decision in this document. It would be a lot more than 60 pages, but we did capture some of the key ideas, right? And I'll get into those details. I just kind of want to give you a kind of 30,000 foot view of what's in here. I tend to talk fast, so if I lose anybody, feel free to jump in with a question. I will happily answer it. Okay, so like I said, it's quite large. We've got a table of contents to help you find your bearings. I'm just going to touch on some highlights. First thing we did, of course, is we just kind of summarized what this is about, what this project was, where we started, a lot of the information Allison just shared, where we were trying to go, how we got there. I'll let you read that at your leisure. This next piece, I'll point out, by the way, this is intended for a couple different audiences. Before I go any further, I should clarify that. It's for our internal use to make sure that all of our stakeholders who come into your project later can catch up and understand what we did and what it is you're asking for help with. But more than that, it's for the variety of users on your side who need to touch this, need to do things with these workflows. So that's going to be the CSG business admins, people like Jim and Nuwan. It's going to be your BT team. It's going to be people like Miles or Miles, excuse me, Ben Miles. It's one of those days already. Ben, somebody who needs to come in and get up to speed on where something was, how we made certain decisions. Back to the memo here, the groups and permissions. We've done this at a somewhat high level because, of course, we're not in your production instance. We can't see exactly how you configured all of your groups there. That's ultimately up to BT to own that. What we did call out is how those groups are used in the workflows that we built in the lower environments that then moved up the stacks. So you can kind of see, for example, the compliance team has a couple different roles that are played, and it's called out in more detail in the workflows themselves, but just to kind of give you a lay of the land of what are the groups that are in play here. We had a number of system integrations. Again, not going to go into all the details, but there's Okta and IIQ, Salesforce, of course, and then the custom integration with DocuSign. So we called out some basic information here, again, to help your BT team stay up to date or to help your business admins understand how are we talking to DocuSign. It's not out of the box, it's this custom integration. So the details are here. Obviously, the BT team can help you on the more granular details if you need to go in the weeds on that. Okay, This next piece, this is the heart of the memo and where we will spend just a moment, but it is the bulk of the length. For each of your workflows, we went through and detailed the different building blocks that make up that workflow. Like I said, kind of key decision pieces, key questions and conditions, in a couple of places, some key formulas, what the templates are, how they work together. All those kinds of details are called out here. We did not document every question or every approver. That would be kind of redundant and not very helpful. Again, it's more the big building blocks, the things that drive major parts of the process. So for example, we've called out the different templates. That's pretty easy and makes sense. Within the create step, we called out major determining questions. One of the first of those, in fact, the first one that you get to on the launch form, is about the language. So as we discussed a minute ago, we haven't actually launched and enabled all those languages yet, but when you're ready to do that, we've called out in the memo here, how does that question drive that? And what do you have to do to actually turn all of those languages on? That'll be a BT change, but we've given the instructions here to help people get up to speed. Similarly, lots of other questions, key pieces of the form we've called out here, how they work together, tried to explain the logic. The workflow is itself somewhat self-documenting. I mean, as you see, we have screenshots here, and the nature of workflow designers, it tells you when a question is being triggered, for example. It tells you whether it's required, etc. But the goal here is to get a snapshot so that as things evolve, you can understand where it came from, how it got there. I'll go for just a moment here and then stop just to make sure I haven't lost anybody. On the review step, same kind of thing. We're not calling out every little detail, but we did call out how the compliance check process works for triaging your red lines. We called out the different order for the different approvals, when those things are triggered and reset. Again, screenshots here to make it very easy to understand how it all fits together without having to go to the app. We called out also for you the permissions. We talked about that this morning with some of you. I know when people can download, when people can share the document, etc., how you would change those things. This is all, of course, documented in our help center as well and in the academy. But specific to your workflow, we wanted to call out the decision that was made regarding when can people download, for example. And the sign step, as it exists currently, there are a number of roles that are configured that trigger some required fields on the form. I know there's been some interest in changing that. So we called out how that works today, along with screenshots. And also, if you look further down in the maintenance section, we'll get to it in a minute, how you might change that going forward, how BT might be able to help you to evolve that. And then the final piece is the archive piece of how does your workflow turn into a record? In your case, it never actually auto-archives. The bookings group comes and does a little bit of cleanup work to make sure everything's good before it goes into the repository. I just talked a lot. There are a few more pieces, but I'll take a break there. Any questions, comments, concerns about this? Okay.
One comment I would make is what we see a lot of customers do is keep this document up to date as they make changes to their workflows. So I would save a version of this and sort of archive it as what we originally closed out the project with, but saving new versions of it can be helpful as you share admin responsibilities and want to keep a contract or a document of record in terms of what's in the workflow design. Yeah, Jim.
Yeah, thank you. This is super clear and laid out really well. So thank you, Ed. Ed, your point is right where my question was. Is like, Nicole, that's a BT ownership, right? Is to keep the documentation updated? Or I assume it's not on the business, but I did just want to clarify.
Yeah, I would say BT would be the owner of the document, but I do see areas where we would co-collaborate in updating these, especially with the business admin changes that are made that your team would do, Jim. So ultimately, yeah, BT would own the doc, but I think we should collaborate together to ensure that it has the latest and greatest from both of our teams making updates. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that. I just want to make sure. Yeah, definitely all on board for collaborating. I just don't want to start adding. Nobody wants me in there adding technical details, so that's why I want to confirm things.
All good, thank you.
Yeah, just to echo that, I mean, I've had a couple of customers refer to this on their own. I didn't prompt them as their Ironclad Bible. whether you're okay with the language or not, I think that is a helpful way to think about it. It is, to some extent, a living document, so not the best way to think about it in that analogy, but it is intended to be a reference point, like I said, for multiple users. And so it's a very helpful thing, especially when you bring on another internal admin of some sort, whether that's a BT type admin who's changing logic or one of the business side admins who needs to own some templates. It's a very good way to look at a particular workflow and understand, how does this one fit together? What am I doing? Am I breaking stuff, or how do I enhance this? So yeah, keeping a copy up to date is a great suggestion. I will, before I move to the kind of final sections, which I clicked on by mistake, I did want to call out one thing on the suite and change order workflows. We documented for those the things that are different about them from the SOW. We did not document all the details for those because they're quite repetitive, right? An awful lot of the approval logic, for example, is very repetitive. A lot of the logic in the change order around the SLLs, for example, again, very repetitive. So we didn't call out 100% of that detail there. It was more of a delta, which is noted in the document. We did point out up above in the SOW section that we're calling out the major things there and only there. Testing recommendations, we have a small section on kind of best practices, which I know you've heard us all talk about a number of times, but how you can use the preview function to see if your form is working the way you expect as changes are made to that. It's also a good way to see if your documents are generating correctly. Sometimes you may have to refresh the screen a little bit. The preview will help you fill in dummy data, but every now and then it misses a field or something. You just have to kind of write again. But when it does that, you can generate your document and actually see in real time, if I pick X, Y, and Z, does it look the way I expect? What about if I do M, N, O, whatever? You can see if it gets the right options in your document and pulls up the right document for that matter, right language, all that kind of stuff. We also called out more detailed processes about who owns what with respect to testing changes that are made. Essentially, CSG is going to own testing, even when BT does the work, because BT is not quality assuring or anything like that, the changes that are made in that UAT environment. But we do recommend that you test all changes, even if they're just language changes, just to make sure you didn't break anything. Maintenance, I won't go through all of these, but we have a number of different callouts here. One thing I do want to highlight is we added a somewhat extensive section here on how to make template changes if you're one of the business admins. So Jim, Nuwan, you may find this video and this little section here quite helpful. We do recommend that you change your templates in Word rather than in Google Docs. Google Docs, it will work with Word files, but as we all know, sometimes does things a little differently than Word would do. And so we do strongly recommend you use a copy of Word for those kinds of things. We did make a little video on how to do some of those things as well. And we have a pretty good section here, I think, on SLL updates. I know we've talked about that a lot, but of course those things can fade from memories over time. So if one of you needs to go in, add an SLL, or replace a placeholder, or change the wording, how do you do that? Well, we have screenshots, some text, and because I think that is extra helpful to all of us, there are some videos embedded in here as well. So you can find those. Here we are. The videos right here will show you how to do each of those scenarios and walk you through it step by step. So if you ever forget or just want a refresher, they're right there for you. I'm going to call out these two sections together. We are tracking quite a number of feedback items and feature requests. I'm not going to go too deep in the weeds on that, but of course our feature requests do go through a process. There's no one-to-one between a request and a particular timeline or deliverable. But we are tracking all of those for you on an ongoing basis. We've linked out here to the phase 1 request that we had received. We've linked out to an overview document that explains our release cycle, which we shared earlier during the project. And then we have a couple of links related to the January meeting we did, where our head of the product team and some other folks came on and walked through our roadmap for this year. Again, just as a reference. As part of the project, we generated quite a few artifacts, let's say. So many of those are training recordings. Many of those are more technical reference sheets for the BT team. Some of them are training outlines. There's all these different things are all embedded in here. Everything we could find that we had worked on together or that had been generated specifically for this project, we went ahead and put in here. Yeah, Elsie.
I'll make another suggestion for this area. I'd recommend, these are all linked to our shared project folder currently. It would be a good idea to download these and share and save them on a Salesforce drive, just so, like years in the future, there aren't any access issues with getting to your project documentation. So a bit of an admin task, but maybe appoint someone to go through and kind of save all of the project documentation on a Salesforce drive that you all want to keep access to. Yeah, Jim.
Yeah, thanks for that. In fact, yeah, I know that there's several in here, whether it's some are technical related, some are probably more project related, but so we can figure it out. But Nicole and Holly in particular, if the two of you could decide who wants to own it and then saving it, just doing it now, because if we start iterating on some of these, I want to make sure that we just have one, because then maybe we can even tell Ironclad that they can either archive theirs or something, so they still have it, but we're not going off of two different sets, because version control is just a disaster. So we're already experiencing that on our templates, and so it's yeah. I just want to make sure that we keep one source of truth and not have a couple of different versions out there.
Yeah. If you do end up doing that and wanting to keep your source of truth on a Salesforce drive, it may be worth going in here and updating links in the closing memo document if you're going to circulate this and people are going to use it as a reference.
I'll call out a couple more quick things and then I will get out of the way. One thing that we've talked about, which was not strictly speaking a project artifact, but we've shared with your team, is something called the Ironclad Workflow Cauldron. That is a BT tool. It is a command line kind of thing. It's very much a geeks tool, but it is for moving your workflows between instances, right? So for example, if Jen goes in and changes some SLL language in UAT, it's been tested by the CSG team, you're ready to go ahead and move it on into production. This can help you do that more quickly by updating a lot of the groups, the user groups that is, and things like that, so that you don't have to do quite as much manual stuff, so that your shared services team won't have to do as much either. So I'm just calling that out again. It's more of a BT tool, but just want to remind everybody that's out there to facilitate those kinds of things. And then the last things I'll touch on real quickly and get out of the way. We do have some information in here about your enterprise success plan. We do have some information in here linking out to the various resources that you have, the Help Center, Academy, live trainings, the community, which I think Colby's going to talk about in a moment, and points of contact. Any other questions about the memo, which of course we are going to share with you in case that wasn't perfectly clear. Any other questions about that before I hand it to Colby? All right, thank you.
Okay, you all will have lots of time with me, so I'll try to keep this relatively brief so we can get through everything. I'll start with talking. Oh,
sorry. Actually, for this group, we have an additional slide that Nicole or Kevin was going to cover. I don't think Kevin is on. Kevin, would you mind walking through the LPX intake process one more time for a refresher?
Yeah, and there's a much grander version of this that we can review another time, but this is a slide that the team has put together that outlines the LPX requests. I'm going to start at the bottom because that's, I'll say, probably the highest volume, where those items that require changes to the template that are going to go through, like what Nuon's doing and what we're going to be doing in this next release. So this is something that is on its maiden voyage right now, where essentially the concierge case is submitted with a request to deploy, and then that configuration change is managed and deployed into production through that fast lane, swim lane. So we're getting our first experience of putting that into use right now. So I'm glad to see that this is operationalized successfully. The LPX team has, I want to say 6 different competency areas that it's supporting, SAL enhancements being one of them for CSG. So the way that this process works is essentially a intake form through the BT Revenue SGG intake channel. I know we've shared that and talked a little bit about it, and there's already a couple items that have been submitted there. Essentially, there is the LPX team dedicated to supporting this, is prioritizing and refining the work at a team level for the different areas. So as we, maybe tomorrow at the PCT or another time soon, we can go through the actual, like the dashboard and the clickable things here that provide the visibility into where does my request go after I submit it. Because we want to make sure that everyone's on the same page. We don't want you to feel like they're just going into the abyss. So there is a dashboard that is a clickable, viewable, essentially tool that allows you to see the backlog and the ranking and prioritization of all of those items. And then as those work gets prioritized and refined, it essentially moves into the team's active work for delivery by the LPX team. So they have 70% of the work that they do is features and enhancements, and the other is KLO, keep the lights on, other things that are just, hey, we have to upgrade this, or this is expiring, or other keep the lights on type of stories. So just wanted to give the 10,000 foot overview into where things go from a LPX team standpoint, and give an opportunity for anyone to ask questions about these tools, processes.
All right. Well, if there aren't any questions, as always, just direct those to Kevin and team if you do have them after the call. And Colby, we can jump into your section.
Also, will you just refresh the page or reshare again? Sorry, I dropped it in another slide to the wrong deck. Okay, so starting with overview of your enterprise success plan. This will be the resources supporting you in the post-implementation cycle. So the first major component of that is an aligned customer success manager. That's myself. And the core objectives that I have when working with you will be, first off, just serving as a direct point of contact. You're managing a very large program, and there's a lot that entails. So I'll be your direct point of contact and kind of a conduit to everything else that we're supporting you with. And then ultimately, I'm just trying to help you maximize your Ironclad value. That takes shape in a lot of different ways, but the core areas are around adoption and usage, platform best practices, any issues or friction points that you interact with. I'll help you mitigate those, product workarounds, and fit gap analysis, overall surfacing any kind of trends or customer trends that I'm seeing that might help shape your strategy with Ironclad. And lastly, internal resource coordination. There'll probably be a lot of people that will be bringing into the fold, including staying aligned with the implementation team. So I'll be supporting you on all those things. We'll talk about technical support team, but you'll have support from our enterprise technical support engineers. We also have our customer enablement team that you're entitled to 2 complimentary private training sessions per year. And then you have a whole suite of always on resources from our academy with training courses and learning paths, our community, which has forums and events to connect you directly to our other customers, as well as our help center, which has a lot of in-depth product documentation. Next slide. I wanted to put these in here to talk you through the overall program pillars. There's a lot